So next we're going to talk about the different steps that are in the selling process. And there's 4 main steps that we're going to talk about. The first one being probing. The second one is communicating your fab statement. Number 3 is handling objections. And then 4th is closing the sale. So probing, it's just what it sounds like. You're asking questions. You're wanting to discover your customers' unique needs and values, and finding solutions to their problems. The only way you can do that is to ask. A big problem as sellers that we run into is assuming that you already know what the customers want or need or what their problems might be. We've all heard the saying, assuming what assuming does. We don't want to do that. But when you probe, you're demonstrating that you're genuine, you're knowledgeable about your product, and and ultimately probing demonstrates that you care. When you ask the right questions at the right time, and try to really get to what problems your customer's having, it shows that you care as a business and as a person, and that's what we want to do. So there's 3 types of questions that we can ask. There's those open questions, which are what, how, why, how. They help you as a salesperson and a business owner to uncover the expectations, and it helps to determine what it's going to take to satisfy that customer. There's other closed questions. So those are yes, no questions. You ask them, what is your favorite variety of this? It asks about specifications, facts, things like that. Confirming questions, those are what you do as an active listener at the end that check for understanding. So a customer tells you this whole long thing about, what kind of produce they like and want, what they need, things like that. And you say, okay, so just to confirm, you're saying that you really prefer this variety because of this. Okay, so you can check for understanding, and it shows that your customer or potential customer that you're caring and that you're listening and that you're trying to get to know them and help them to solve that problem. So there are some common problems in probing, though. It's not as easy as it seems. So sometimes if the salesperson is very talkative, they can discourage the customer from talking, and the customer doesn't feel like they have enough time to respond or make that connection with the salesperson. So we want to make sure that we ask our question and we stop and we were really an active listener, direct our attention at that customer and make sure we're listening to what they're saying. So the salesperson talks too much, doesn't listen enough. We don't want to do that. We don't want to interrupt the customer. And lastly, we don't want to assume as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a farmer, when we're trying to ask those customers, we know what they want, what they need, what we can do for them. We don't want to assume. So we want to make sure we're listening. So on page 7 of your handout, you can take a couple minutes and list some questions that you think would be helpful to ask your customers. And maybe we could have a couple people share too. So be thinking of a couple questions that you could ask your customers to get to know a little bit more about what they want or need. So does anyone have a couple of questions that you could share that you might ask your customers to get to know more about what they want or need, or get to know more about them? Feel free to just shout them out.
I always ask, is there a certain flavor that they like, or a certain kind of fruit that they like better? I ask questions like those. But when I'm selling my jams and jellies, it just depends on what product I'm selling. But for that, I always just ask them, or do they have any unique ideas for jams? And, they kind of talk that way also.
That's perfect. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody else have some questions that you could ask your customers that are unique to your business? Okay. So we're going to move on to the next slide then. So we talked about probing. Sorry, I'm trying not to lose my voice. So we talked about probing and what questions we can ask our customers, but essentially we're going to take that to step 2, and that's communicating your fab. So really we're building a bridge from customer focus and probing to where the customer tells you what they want and need. And then we're going to kind of transition that into salesperson focus and telling them your story. You're keeping the customer with you. You're taking them on that journey with you. So when you're telling your story, you want to take what they've told you, that information that they were willing to share and give to you, and then you want to communicate what is relevant from what they told you. If they talk to you about a certain, maybe they're talking to you, they like tomatoes, don't tell them about some soap that you happen to make. Make sure that you're communicating what is relevant to them. You want to focus on what your offering can do for them. Again, go back to benefits and values and communicating those. How will they benefit from the product or service that you are offering? And you want to try to convince them that your product or service is the best solution. So we call it FAB because it consists largely of features, advantages, and benefits. So this is where your selling point, your sales pitch, your elevator pitch comes in very handy. So when you're communicating your FAB or your FAB, your features have to be measurable. So you have to be able to actually measure them. They have to be proven, and they have to be tangible. Tangible just means you can see, feel, taste, hear, smell, whatever that is. They have to be able to be realized. So what do customers buy? So customers don't buy features, they buy the benefit. So they buy what actually benefits them, not the features that you want to sell. So once again, we're comparing those 4 Ps to the 4 Cs and trying to link those. And that will help to close that sale. So if you're putting together a FAB statement, so you say, so what, because of this feature, you will be able to gain this advantage, which means you will realize this benefit. So we have an example. So our farm produces vegetables with a variety of maturity growing days. Because of this, we can provide fresh vegetables for a wider range of dates, which means that our farm can be your source of fresh produce from mid-May until mid-October. So that's a longer selling season than most could have. So that's definitely an advantage that the consumer will gain, and the benefit that they will have. They'll be able to do that because of the feature of your variety of growing maturity growing days. So that's an example, but you want to make sure that you kind of have that in your back pocket ready to tell a customer. So on page 8 of your handout, you can create your own FAB statement that you can have ready. I'll give you just a minute to jot a few ideas down. Okay, I hope you were able to jot down a few ideas there for your FAB statement. So step number 3 in the selling process, handling objections. This is probably everybody's least favorite part. So when you're handling objections, make sure that you realize that they are real and they don't need to be feared. A lot of times they're repetitive and they're kind of predictable. So when you have an objection from a customer or potential customer, it's not a sign of failure. Don't take it as that. Take it that the customer is actually thinking. They're actually thinking about something of your product. They're just not saying, no, thanks, and leaving. They're saying, well, what about this? Or, how can you know about this or something that, they're asking you a question or having an objection. And it really shows to you what you have to overcome. So how can you explain things in a different way? How can you communicate things in a way to clear up that objection for your customer? The only bad objection is one that you don't hear about. So those are the ones that go by the wayside and maybe are said to other people and not to you, but you can prepare for those. you can prepare for objections. And it is a fact that the same objections, like I said, are predictable. They'll come up over and over and over again. So you can be prepared for those. They may be due to misunderstanding. So in that case, you can say, I apologize. I didn't explain that clearly. Let me go back and let me put that in another way. Lack of information. In that case, it's no problem. Nobody knows your product better than you. You can fix that. You can give the customer more information and clear that up. Sometimes there's legitimate concerns or reasons that someone is not interested in your product or they don't want to buy your product. You need to listen to that, restate it back for them, so rephrase it back and make sure that you're understanding what they're saying, and then ask for more information. Sometimes it's okay to let that person go. You don't want to hold them hostage there with you. If they really have an objection, say, I completely understand this is what you're saying, maybe in the future, blah, blah, but make sure you kind of let them exit if they want to. But there's not really any problems that you can't plan for. You can plan for most objections and be able to handle them. So sometimes as an entrepreneur, you need to realize that there's real and there's false objections. Sometimes those false objections sounds like real objections, and they really just cover up a smoke screen. Sometimes it's because the customer is really not with you. Something in your story didn't come across. Something about the value or the benefit that you have for them didn't come through. You might have hurried or skipped a necessary step earlier in the sales call. Sometimes they just don't have the funds to buy what you're selling, and that's okay. Some common objections that you might hear: thanks, but we're really fine right now with the product we're using. That's okay. Say, I really appreciate you coming over to talk to me. I'll be back if you ever change your mind. Sometimes they'll say, I'm sorry, that's really just not what we had in mind. And that's okay. Sometimes they say, oh my gosh, I didn't think it would cost that much. And in that case, let that customer save face and move on and be okay with that. And step 4, when we're talking about selling, it's really about closing the sale. You don't want people to just linger at your booth forever. So you can ask for an order in a kind way. So let's go ahead and get on that order. Can I schedule a delivery for you? When would be a good time to meet with you to deliver this product? You can ask for the order. And then at the end, of course, make sure that you thank them for their business.